What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Brittany, and I wanted to start this new little shorter series where we unpack certain things in media, what they mean, certain theories, and just how they affect us. So in today's video, we are going to start with the male gaze theory 101. You've probably heard the term the male gaze, but what does it actually mean and how does it influence everything from the movies that we watch to the way that we view ourselves as people? We're going to break down the theory, talk about how it functions in film and TV shows, and why it's so important for us to understand this in 2024 and going forward. Now remember, this is more than just a conversation about a film theory. It's a lens for critically analyzing the everyday media that surrounds us. So let's start by unpacking the core of the male gaze theory. The male gaze is a concept that was introduced by feminist film theorist Laura Mulvey in her 1975 essay, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. Mulvey argued in this essay that mainstream media was predominantly designed from the perspective of a heterosexual male viewer. This meant that women in films were often reduced to objects of desire. They were there to be looked at and consumed rather than having depth or even their own narrative. This theory is grounded in the idea that the camera and the narrative are shaped by a male perspective. This means that the story and how the women are presented are both catered to male fantasies. So what makes this particularly powerful is that because film is so pervasive, it shapes how both men and women understand gender roles and relationships. But the male gaze is not just about what we're seeing, it's also about how we're seeing it. The way the camera lingers on certain parts of women's bodies, the framing, and even the choice of angles all function to reinforce this objectifying viewpoint. The gaze is a tool that connects male protagonists to the audience, essentially making us, the viewers, identify with him and share his perspective of the women on screen. Mulvey outlined three distinct layers of the male gaze that work together to create this objectification. The first is the literal gaze. This is the visual component, or the camera's perspective. You can think of this as the way the camera captures and frames women in a way that emphasizes their bodies, particularly in scenes where the shot lingers on their legs, their chest, their butts, their face. Think very Quentin Tarantino. Then there's the narrative gaze. This refers to how the plot is shaped around male characters and their desire for women. Often the women are given no real agency. They exist to be conquered, desired, or rescued. Their story arcs are subjugated to the male protagonist's journey, and they're usually defined in relation to men, either as love interest or villain. So this is the damsel in distress. This is why Meg from Hercules was so adamant that she was not a damsel in distress. That's one of the quickest things I can think of. Damsels in distress, princesses in castles, things like that. The final is the psychological gaze, and this is a little bit more subtle, but it is still incredibly impactful. It's about the viewer's identification with the male character. In mainstream media, the male protagonist's desire and actions often mirror those of the audience. So when a film places us in the protagonist's shoes, we're subconsciously asked to look at women in the same way that he does, which is often going to be as objects of desire. So let's look at a few examples to see how the male gaze operates in popular media. So we can start with The Matrix, which is one of my all-time favorite films. But while The Matrix is often celebrated for being groundbreaking as far as its visual effects and the complex themes of the story, let's take a closer look at how the female characters like Trinity are framed. Trinity is an incredible character in her own right. She is strong, intelligent, and really an essential part of the team. But her character is often framed through the lens of Neo's desire or male desire, particularly in scenes where she is dressed in very tight leather. Whenever I see those, or like superheroes where the girl has her hair down her back and she's wearing heels and throwing on makeup before a fight, I just always think, how impractical, like where are her sweatpants? But it's the male gaze. Contrast with this with something like Mad Max Fury Road, where women like Furiosa are not framed for male consumption. Furiosa is portrayed as a fierce, autonomous character. The camera doesn't linger on her body. She's seen as a full person and not just an object. This is a prime example of how films can push back against the male gaze by giving female characters their agency and full narrative weight. But here's the kicker. Fury Road wasn't just directed by a man. It was produced by a male-dominated studio system, but it was designed with women's perspectives in mind. This shows that even in traditionally male-dominated industries, we can find ways to break free from harmful norms. The male gaze is far-reaching. It's not just about how women are portrayed in films, it's about how we internalize those portrayals in the real world. The gaze teaches us how to see ourselves and how to see others. If women are constantly shown as objects of desire, it impacts how they feel about their worth, how they present themselves, and how they navigate relationships. This is why you often hear feminist discussions about the hypersexualization of women in advertising, music videos, and now even on social media. Women, especially young women, are socialized to value themselves based on how others perceive their bodies. This isn't just a Hollywood problem either. It's a societal issue that reinforces rigid gender roles, creating pressure for women to conform to unattainable beauty standards. But challenging the male gaze isn't just about rejecting traditional media. It's about reshaping the way that we think about women's bodies, their stories, and their right to exist outside of male desire. So how do we fight back against the male gaze in the media that we consume? It's not a simple answer, but it does start with representation. When women take creative control, whether behind the camera as directors, writers, or cinematographers, they can shift the focus from objectification to empowerment. Films like Lady Bird and Booksmart showcase women's relationships and struggles in ways that are not defined by their relationships with men. These films pass the reverse male gaze test, where they center women's lives and experiences. As an audience, we can be more conscious of the media that we consume, questioning whether the portrayals we see are empowering or objectifying. And on a personal level, we can create spaces where women's stories are told through their lens, not as objects, but as fully realized complex individuals. The male gaze, again, is not just a film theory. It's a lens for understanding how women's bodies and stories have been objectified in mainstream media. But by pushing back against it and creating more inclusive, nuanced narratives, we can start to change how women are represented in film and beyond. So what do you think? Have you noticed the male gaze in your favorite films? Because I know that I absolutely have. Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so that you don't miss a new video. I will see you in the next one.